Okay, for the first project that we're going to do, we're going to do what's called the name design project. Here is an example of the name design project, just so that you can see the size of what you're doing. Your objective is you'll be making a name project using what you have learned about elements of art and principles of design, like the examples below. You'll be using Sharpie as your medium, and that's black Sharpie for those of you who are unclear. So these are two examples of this project. One of them was done recently this past semester, and this one was done a few years ago. But you know, very different process for each person, but still very unique. Okay, so first we got to learn about the elements and principles of art. First, we learn about the elements of art. Line is the path of a point. You guys know what lines are, I'm pretty sure. But I give you a few examples here at the bottom. You control the length, width, and height of those lines. And lines can be different directions. They can be different thicknesses. They can be curvy. They can be wavy, zigzaggy, whatever. All right, the next one, shape or form, is a line that touches itself to enclose a space. There are two different kinds of shape. There are geometric shapes, which are shapes that can be named like circles, squares, rectangles, etc. And then organic shapes are shapes that are made up. Here are a few examples. I've got regular old shapes, just like you're used to. Forms are shapes that are a little more three-dimensional. Your organic shapes are the ones that I just kind of drew out, made up on the spot, and your geometric shapes are ones that actually can be named, and when you see them, you know what they're called. Space is how an area is filled. So for example, if you were working on this particular project, how the area is filled, we're talking about the design that you actually put on your paper, okay? There are two different types of space. There's positive space, which is the space that you took up on your composition or on your project. And then the negative space is all the space you did not use. So if you're drawing something on a piece of paper and you drew, you know, a tree in the center of your paper, your tree is your positive space, and all the white space around that tree on your paper is going to be your negative space. Okay, here are a couple examples. Here's the actual object that we're drawing, and here is the negative space, which is all the background around that image. Same thing here, the item that we're drawing and all the background around here. All right, texture, the look or feel of a surface. There are two different types of texture. There's tactile texture, which is how a surface actually feels. So if I touch it, it feels what it looks like it would feel. So if it's kind of fuzzy looking and I touch it, it's fuzzy, yeah, that's tactile texture. Visual texture is a little different. It is texture that you can see, but when you touch it, the surface doesn't actually feel the way it looks like it feels. It's almost an illusion, okay? Visual texture is how the surface looks like it might feel. Okay, there are a few examples there. Value, the darkness or lightness of an area. And when we're talking about value in art, we're talking about light to dark. We're talking about shading. We're talking about depth. We're talking about the way that you make something look a little more three-dimensional with shading, going from light to dark with pencil. Color, you guys know what color is. That's reflected light. I'm going to give you some examples here. The next thing is principles of design. Those are a little different than the elements of art. You use the elements and principles together to create a work of art. The principles of design are balance, that's the weight of a design. There are three different types of balance. There's symmetrical balance, which is the same on both halves. There's asymmetrical balance, which is not the same on both halves. And then there's radial balance, which is balance from a center point. And I've given you a few examples here. Symmetrical balance is exactly the same on both sides. If I were to fold this in half, it's going to meet up and be exactly the same. Asymmetric means if I were to do the same thing, fold it in half, they're not going to meet up and they will not be exactly the same on both sides. Radial balance is something kind of like a circle where you balance from the center and everything is balanced based on that center point, okay? When we're talking about a work of art, something that is visually balanced is when you take both shape, color, and you balance them in a composition or an artwork where you've got the same type of shape, which is an outlined dark blue shape in one corner, and I balance it by putting it in the opposite corner. Maybe it's a different shape, but visually they look similar. Same thing with color. If I've got something very bright in one bottom corner, I might balance it by putting that same color up in the opposite corner, creating visual balance. Okay, patterns. You guys should know what patterns are. This is repetition of line or shape. They can be organized, random, or integrated. Okay, so what does that mean? Organized means if I were to take a ruler, measure it out, very precise, make very precise lines to create my pattern. So something like a checkerboard. Random pattern is basically when I put things down that kind of have no rhyme or reason, but I'm repeating that shape over and over and over again, like the second example. The third example is an integrated shape. That's when shapes overlap or touch. So you can kind of look at this and see that it's a bullseye shape, one on top of the other on top of the other. They're overlapping and they're touching. Okay. And the last one, I just like to include a line design of another random pattern where it's lines kind of placed randomly to create a different type of pattern. Contrast. Contrast is the amount of difference that is, we're talking about, like, usually we're talking about color. So there's high contrast and low contrast. High contrast is a big or noticeable difference, and low contrast is a subtle difference. What I mean by this is if I were to take two colors right next to each other that are very different from each other, like say red and green, okay? Red and green have nothing to do with each other. They are completely different colors. That is an example of high contrast. But low contrast would be something more like, I've got two colors that are from the same family, light blue, dark blue. They are similar in that they're both blues, okay? But they are low contrast because I can still see one standing out from the other, but they're similar, okay? And I've given you two examples here, yellow on a black background versus light blue on a dark blue background. Same thing with this picture here, light blue on a lighter blue background. This is more of a high contrast, which is a dark green over that light blue background. And this one, same thing, red on the bottom on a white background, and then reverse it, red background, white on it, okay. Emphasis. This is the ability for something to stand out or get noticed. We call that the focal point. So in these three examples, the emphasis was created with color, or two of the examples, the emphasis was created with color. This item is exactly the same shape and kind of pattern as the rest of these, but it was done in red, making it stand out and become the emphasis. Same thing with these tomatoes. All these tomatoes are red. This last one is green on a sea of red, and that emphasizes that green one, okay? This is another example of emphasis. We're emphasizing this little guy standing here with the umbrella, and the entire background is created with these lines looking like rain, but where the umbrella hits, it's kind of a clear spot, giving it emphasis, okay? Unity is where the composition looks like it belongs together. It has a sense of oneness. So when we're talking about a work of art, we're talking about making it look like it goes together. So I have created 3 examples here for you. This is a artwork done by a famous artist. His name was Wayne Thiebaud, and he created these images of desserts. But the way that he made this look unified is it's all 3 ice creams. They're all in the same kind of cone. They're all in a row. They all have 2 scoops. The way I would throw off this unity is if it were 3 ice cream cones and a slice of cake. That would make it look different, okay? Same thing here. We have these outlines of these birds flying over a, what do you call it, a sunset. They're all done in black silhouette, which creates unity. This next one is a triangle design. It's actually a collage, but what unifies it is the colors are the same throughout. We haven't introduced anything different. Like you don't see one triangle in like red, because that would throw off the unity. But all the triangles are in the same color scheme, and they are all triangles. They're all going in the same direction. That creates unity. Last one is rhythm. This is a sense of actual motion. That's when you look at a work of art and you can kind of see that it almost looks like it's moving, okay? So if you look at this one, you can kind of almost visually kind of see this swirl thing going on. Without realizing it, it's giving you motion. Same thing here, it's kind of giving you this like, woo, design, okay? This one, same thing, it's kind of like you're going into this hole. All right, it creates motion for you. Okay, so using those elements and principles, you are going to create your own design for this project. The supplies that you're going to use is a 12 by 18 piece of white paper. That paper has a yellow dot on one side of it, yellow highlighter. That's how you're going to know it's the right piece. You're going to need 2 black Sharpies, a fine point and an ultra fine point. And what I mean by that is the skinny Sharpie and then a regular size Sharpie. You're going to need a pencil, a ruler, probably an eraser, and your sketchbook or a piece of sketch paper. Step-by-step instructions for this. I've got videos embedded as you go along, so you can watch them separately, but I'm going to just go through the steps. Number 1 is a brainstorming step. In your sketchbook or on your sketch paper, you're going to create 3 interesting letter-style designs as fonts for your whole name. They must be letters, open letters, which are letters with space inside. So think of that as like bubble letters. The letters that I can actually draw something inside the shape of the letter. Okay. Brainstorm a few patterns you'd like to use on this project. And I put you a note here that I've included some pattern examples at the bottom of this document to help you if you get stuck. But these are some examples of some interesting lettering. Okay. Number 2, on that same page, draw a box, roughly 3 by 5. About this big, about the size of a 3 by 5 card. Doesn't have to be accurate. You do not have to measure it. Just kind of draw out yourself a little box. Okay. Inside that box, draw your name as you'd like it to appear on your project. Make sure that your name touches all 4 sides of that box one time. And if you watch the video underneath step number 3 here, I'm going to go through that process with you so that you can see how I get that to touch all 3 sides. Okay. Begin filling each section with different patterns. Each section that makes a different shape gets filled with a different pattern. Again, I show this in the video. You can use the same pattern twice, but not right next to the other one. And try not to use similar patterns next to each other. You're going for contrast. So think about that when determining your patterns. Like I don't want to put small polka dots next to medium polka dots because that's not going to create contrast. I might put polka dots next to a stripe because those two are completely different. Number 4, using a piece of 12 by 18 white paper, the one with the yellow dot, draw a 1-inch border. And I've given you a video for how to do that here. Number 5 says inside that 1-inch border, lightly redraw everything you just planned out in your sketchbook. Make sure your name touches all 4 sides one time and all your patterns are exactly as you want them to appear. This is a video of me transferring steps 1, 2, and 3 to my white paper. Number 6 says lightly mark everything with a B that you would like filled with Sharpie. If you want it to stay white, leave it blank. This is the time to be thinking about contrast. To get your name to stand out, maybe all your patterns inside your letters are just outlines of patterns. And then all your background patterns around your name would be lots of heavy areas filled with Sharpie. I've given you some examples of how to create lights versus darks with your patterns. Over here, I've given you some stripes, just plain consistent stripes. As you get further over here, the stripes get wider, the white spaces get skinnier, which makes that pattern read as a darker pattern. Same thing going on here. Skinny, small dots spaced out over here read as a light pattern, but if you enlarge the dots and reduce the white space behind, it makes it look like a darker pattern. Number 7 says add black Sharpie to all areas marked with a B, small Sharpie for small jobs, large Sharpie for larger jobs, outline any lines or borders. I'm going to insert some examples here. I just have not created them yet. once I go through creating my videos, that's going to be added to this section here. Number 8 says when you're all done, fill out a critique sheet. And I have given you an example of a correctly done critique sheet right here. And you can find this sheet next to the document under the classwork tab. For grading purposes, you are going to receive a certain set of points for each thing that you do, and the point system is out of 100 points. So your name touching all 4 sides, you get 10 points. Whoops, 10 points for that. 20 points for your open letters and how interesting those were and how they turned out. 20 points for your pattern placement, how you place them, where you place them, how they look. Contrast is 20 points. So does your name stand out and do your patterns create contrast for you? Creativity is 10 points, craftsmanship is 10 points, and critique is 10 points. For submitting this work, you are going to put your name on the front of your work on that 1-inch border. So if we're talking about this sheet here, I would put my name right down here at the bottom somewhere. Okay, photograph it. There's a video showing you how to photograph it under the stream in my Google Classroom. And number 2 says complete a critique sheet. You have some options here. You can either write out just your answers to the critique sheet on a lined piece of paper, then photograph it with your name written on top. You could use Kami to complete the critique sheet and then upload it that way. Last one is to type your answers in a Google Doc and then put your name at the top and then upload that to Google Classroom. Number 3 says upload your critique and the photograph of your project to Project 1 in Google Classroom under the Classwork tab. And then if you need them, here are some ideas for different patterns that you might want to use for this project.